is a springtime rain, to have a friend right in your corner. Your heart will feel a little warmer. Tender loving care, tender loving care. Each warm and friendly touch lets someone know you care so much. Tender loving care, tender loving care.
Good evening, I'm Dr. Greenbrier Almond, and thank you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Each week on Channel 3, I'm happy to talk about this interface between Christianity and medicine. And tonight, before the new year gets too far along, I want to return to this topic of New Year's resolutions and talk about some of the wisdom that we have here in the mountains for health, as we would relate our program, and to wisdom, as we would relate our program, and of course to how we treat one another, that interface between Christianity and medicine. And I thought I would begin just by reflecting what I did this weekend. My wife and I were guests, along with others, with Nancy and Fred Shope up on Straight Fork in southern Upshur County, and had a chance to see where Fred was raised and some of the farm land that they have, and chance to look out at this beautiful creation, but also, of course, very cold, and it's in the middle of winter, and lonely at times, and isolated. Fred was telling me about his father and some of the wisdom of his father. And Fred remembers over the years his father saying, you can only pay so much for a whistle. It's an interesting comment, isn't it? You can only pay so much for a whistle. And I asked Fred, well, what did your dad generally mean, and what was the context of making that type of statement? And of course, it was usually in the context of buying or selling produce. Maybe if he's going to buy some feed for his sheep and there's a price for that, then he's considering whether he can afford it. You can only pay so much for a whistle. You can buy the feed, but can you afford to pay your sheep and then raise the sheep and then get wool from it and then sell the animal? And what is the reality of raising a sheep, and what is the cost? That would be one example, which Fred recalled. There would be other times where they would be hiring labor. They had more farm than they could manage, and they needed to have local people help them, hay time and tasks like that. And so there would be a price for labor. Again, Fred's dad would come back with this old comment, you can only pay so much for a whistle. Meaning, of course, he was going to negotiate the price for labor to the price that he could afford to hire them and then still run his farm. And there's wisdom to that. That's the type of New Year's resolution I want to talk about tonight, because I felt that this year is not started yet, really, and the folk wisdom needs to be needs to be presented a little bit further. At the same time, I was thinking like this, and here we are tonight talking about it. On Facebook today, 14th day of January, Stephen Kuntz, local boy done good, sent out a Facebook statement from quoting Abraham Lincoln, who said that folk are about as happy as they make up their mind to be. There's wisdom in that too, isn't there? That we can determine to be happy up to a point, and we can be about as happy as we make up our mind to be. And that reminded me then of Dear Abby, and I cut out a column out of our local paper, the Republican, or the Record Delta. It used to be Republican Delta and Democratic Record, but they've combined that, of course, years ago. And the Record Delta has a Dear Abby column, and Abby Van Buren, Abigail Van Buren, who started this, had a column that she ran about this time every year, and her daughter now is quoting her mother's column. And I thought, well, that's good too. This is along the line of the folk wisdom that we want to share. So let me share some of these with you and make comments as it applies to living here in Buchanan, West Virginia, in the middle of Appalachia in 2014. Just for today, and this is, she's going to follow the model of Al-Anon. This is also something I subscribe to for my patients, and I think the 12-step approach helps us in many ways. If you're trying to improve yourself, go back and look up the 12 steps. Google them or get a copy one way or another, and look at the 12-step approach to self-improvement, whether it's getting over addiction or whatever issue you're going to deal with. And Dear Abby's applied this, some of the steps, to just general living. Just for today, she says, I will live through this day only. I will not brood about yesterday or obsess about tomorrow. I will not set far-reaching goals to try to overcome all of my problems at once. I know that I can do something for 24 hours that would overwhelm me if I had to do it for a lifetime. And I, again, on Facebook, people putting out common wisdom like this. Someone sent in a psychologist statement that if you had a cup of water that looks half full, half empty, the question would be, is it half full or half empty? The psychologist makes a point in this article on Facebook that it depends on how long you hold that cup. If it's however much it weighs or how big a cup it is, will be easy at first. But if you have to hold on to that cup for very long, all day long, or 2 days, whatever, you can imagine when it becomes too heavy to carry. You can't carry that. So there are many problems that we deal with every day that are solvable. We can be pessimistic about them, we can be optimistic about them, but they're solvable problems. We can do something about it. But if we don't deal with them, we just hold on to them, and then they'll get too heavy for us, and life will be too heavy for us. So just for today, we can tackle some things, and one step at a time, one day at a time, we can deal with something. We can, in psychotherapy over the years, we've used the onion analogy. We will peel back one layer of onion. If you have a past that's unhappy, that's sad, that's tragic, that's a disaster, to be frank about it, then if you are going to deal with that, take the onion as an example and look at the thin skin of the onion. And if you peel back a little bit of onion skin, you'll cry. I did this not for psychotherapy reasons, but just working with my granddaughter last week. We were making chili, and so I was teaching her about the onion, and so we peeled back the onion, one skin, and of course Eliza then got tears in her eyes just being close to an onion that's freshly peeled back. But whatever life we're peeling back, whatever we're dealing with, if we deal with it just a little bit at a time, we still may cry, but we can deal with it. We can go forward and make a progress like that. So that's a good beginning, isn't it, in the folk wisdom here. And you're not going to pay too much for this whistle. This is going to be practical. Just for today, Dear Abby says, I will be happy. I will not dwell on thoughts that depress me. If my mind fills with clouds, I will chase them away and fill it with sunshine. Steve Kuntz helped me with Abraham Lincoln's statement that folk are about as happy as they make up their mind to be. Certainly that applies to the cloudy days and the sunshine days that Dear Abby's talking about. And this was one of those days. If you were out and about today and looked up into our sky, and I took some time to do that, we had some blue sky, but we also had some really, really dark clouds. It looked like they were going to rain. Maybe it was going to rain more than it had last night, and but at the same time, the sunshine was trying to break through those clouds, and there was a lot of blue sky, and it turned out to be a very nice day. And quite warm for a day in January, as a contrast to a week ago when it was even too cold to keep the studio open here, and we had that polar vortex that really was something. But just for today, you can be about as happy as you can be, and you can stay on the sunny side of the street and get those clouds out of the way. Another one would be, just for today, I will accept what is. I will face reality. I will correct those things that I can correct and accept those things I cannot. That comes right back to Fred's father's whistle statement. You can only pay so much for a whistle. There is a reality factor in everyday life. We live insulated from life for the most part, unless you are a farmer, unless you're trying to raise your own crop, unless you're off the grid, if you're trying to be your own power source, if you're cutting your own firewood, you're drawing your own water from a well. If you're living that way, then you know about reality. Because you're having to measure how you can exist and how you can live. The rest of us are protected somewhat in a bubble, and that bubble really isn't much of a protection. People in Charleston, West Virginia, since last Thursday, and that's 9 counties in southern West Virginia, have been without ready water supply because of a chemical spill. And if they had to face a reality of how fragile our ecosystem is, then they have come up against that this weekend. And that's not to say that it's their fault. It's not. A reality is something that we have to deal with, however it comes to us. And people have been basically, I think, handling it in a practical way, as West Virginians do. They have said things like, it could be worse, or I remember when I was a child and we had to draw our own water. And they begin to philosophize and just deal with reality. And certainly that's the way to approach life. But not get too far ahead of ourselves, as many people have, hoping to have more money than they actually could ever earn, or to live in a house bigger than they can afford, or to drive a car that they cannot afford. You can think of all those examples where we have lived beyond our means and really have not lived with a reality that we have to face and accept. Another one of Dear Abby's statements, and following the 12-step approach of Al-Anon and other 12-step approaches for improvement, would be, just for today, I will improve my mind, and I will read something that requires effort, thought, and concentration. I will not be a mental loafer. I have enjoyed trying to improve my mind every day. For me, it began back with our school, Buckhannon Upshur High School, and probably in the 11th grade, I think, I was introduced to Benjamin Franklin. And Lynn Westfall, my English teacher, had me reading Benjamin Franklin and the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. And here's where I began to do mental exercises in earnest that I've continued to do now, going to be 66 years old in a few days. But Benjamin Franklin, so from 16 to 66, let's say, I've been doing this for 50 years. He wrote in a diary every day something new. He had to be creative, he had to solve a problem. It might be a minor problem, but he had to write about it in a diary. And he did that. And it was quite remarkable. And he attributed in his autobiography that type of exercise led to all sorts of solutions that he would never have conceptualized without the discipline of trying to do something new every day to solve a problem. And he came up with things like streetlights in Philadelphia. He came up with things like rural free delivery, our mail delivery system. He came out with the Saturday Evening Post, a magazine that I enjoyed when I was growing up. And of course, people don't really know about magazines today because we have everything online. But you know, that idea lasted for several hundred years. And of course, he helped us as a nation. He was one of the founding fathers, and with wisdom helped us gather together and solve our problems in Philadelphia, the year that in 1776, when we declared our independence and began this great experiment that we call the United States of America. It's an idea that he allowed other people to think about, and he shared his ideas about it. And it all came out of, if you will, this basic concept, just for today, as Dear Abby says, I will improve my mind, I will read something that requires effort, thought, and concentration. I will not be a mental loafer. Another one of these would be, just for today, I will make a conscious effort to be agreeable. I will be kind and courteous to those who cross my path. I will not speak ill of others. I will improve my appearance, speak softly, will not interrupt when someone else is talking. Of course, we call our program Tender Loving Care, so I could probably make a whole program out of this one concept of being agreeable and being kind to one another and caring and concerned for one another. And love is what makes the world go round. If you want to think about in the cold of winter, what is the difference between winter and spring? It's the sunshine. It's the warmth. It's the caring that you get in the summer. It's a different feeling, and we equate loneliness and grief and loss with darkness and sadness and coldness, and so it is. This is a big concept that Dear Abby's highlighting for us, and we can make a conscious effort about that. Go back to Steve Kuntz's comment from Abraham Lincoln: folks are about as happy as they make up their mind to be. We can make a conscious decision, a conscious effort to be agreeable. And every time someone crosses our path, we can then smile, give a big smile. We can say, "Good to see you today." And I was out walking at the college. There are people out there with their own New Year's resolutions, wanting to exercise more, eat less, those type of things. And we greeted each other, and we were pleasant. Everyone seemed to be in a very pleasant mood. I was in a pleasant mood. It made the day go better. We can certainly do that. When I began Wesleyan in 1966 as a student, we said about ourselves that we were a very friendly campus, and we greeted each other as we crossed at the sidewalk or wherever we were, and people were very friendly and still are. And that's a hallmark in Buchanan, West Virginia. Proud to say, even as we were driving up in the country, people were courteous, letting people in and out of traffic, and waiting for people, and not in such a hurry to be brisk and brusque and irritated with other people. Another of the 10-step or 12-step approach will be: just for today, I will refrain from improving anybody but myself. So even though I'm doing a program on TV to the community, I'm hoping that you receive this as me talking to myself as much as anything. And I'm not saying to any one person, you have to change what you're doing. But let's start with ourselves. Let's improve ourselves. We can decide, and I like the beauty of New Year's resolutions as we consider them is that each of us make our own resolution. We don't have to follow someone else's pattern now. We need to decide for ourselves. When I finally graduated from high school, and in particular I remember this, I felt free. I felt, I can study and read what I want to read and study. That has not really been the case because there's a lot of required reading in medicine, and of course I went on to spend 11 more years in school, so I had a lot of classes on the way to becoming a doctor that required a lot out of me. But one of the real pleasures of life is to be able to pick up and read something or study something or learn to play a musical instrument or hike a hill that no one told you to hike and stand up on top of that and look over the vistas as we did on Sunday at Fred Chope's Growing Up Farm in Straight Fork, southern Upshur County. Those are great things that we can do for ourselves, treats that we can do for ourselves, and improve ourselves, not trying to improve anyone else. And just for today, I will do something positive to improve my health. If I'm a smoker, I'll quit. If I'm overweight, I will eat healthfully, if only for today. And not only that, I will get off the couch and take a brisk walk, even if it's only around the block. So the steps toward health are, of course, ones that we have to take. We have talked as a nation about healthcare reform. We've talked about the need for insurance reform as much as anything. And many folk are going to have health insurance now that did not have it, and that's a good thing. However, all that will not improve one's health. It's what we decide to do for ourselves. What is the food we're going to put in our mouth? What is the exercise we're going to do? Or are we going to actually go to bed early? Benjamin Franklin's statement, early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Are we going to follow that type of practice and be healthy in this year or not? And we can make conscious decisions at least to move in that direction. Okay. Now, just for today, I will gather the courage to do what is right and take the responsibility for my own actions. I suppose if I had to think of one thing that I've learned in psychiatry and in medicine over the last 40 years is that there is a blame game. People are wanting to blame someone else for all their woes, whatever's happened to them. When I was in training with West Virginia University and training in Charleston, there was a country western song, Somebody Done Somebody Wrong song. That was the name of the song. And it was a litany of things that people have done wrong to other people. And indeed, people are cruel and they do harmful things. But there's a lot of what we need to do is accept responsibility and then also then direct other people to leave us alone or to set boundaries for ourselves and ask people to respect those boundaries. And we need to determine our own fate in a big way. And it takes courage. It takes courage to live that way. And a lot of people are wanting to just drift and not take that conscious step. But as Dear Abby says, and as we talk about this in a New Year's resolution, it's important to be aware that just for today, I will gather the courage to do what is right and take responsibility for my own action. Well, those are the steps that Dear Abby wanted to put forward from the Al-Anon approach. She then quotes a couple other things. I think we have time to consider those. One was from the Indian tradition, the Hindu tradition, and there's wisdom in all faiths, and I don't think we should put anyone down until we at least consider what they're saying. But this is from India, and the quote goes like this: "Man has subjected himself to thousands of self-inflicted bondages. Wisdom comes to a man who lives according to the true eternal laws of nature." And if you think about that, that's a good way to think of what we are doing. We put our own self in bondage. Anytime you go into debt to someone else, you put yourself in bondage to that person. Anytime that you don't determine your own course of action, you put yourself in bondage. Our governor, as we talked about the water spill, the chemical spill in Charleston, and he's given his the state address and so forth, is recalling that we've had a proud history with the coal industry, coal mining, and while this chemical was being used to clean coal, it was not necessarily a coal-related accident that was happening here. There was a chemical spill, but the governor made more points about this, including the fact that we have a rainy day fund because we have saved money as we have extracted minerals, coal primarily, gas, of course, oil. We've saved the money. We have a big rainy day fund, and we can tap that for our needs as the rainy day comes. But other people have also added to the comment of the governor and say, if we had only saved another penny or two, we would be the richest state in the union. And all of that is true too. Just to say, to follow the wisdom here, we don't want to put ourselves in bondage. We want to get ourselves out of bondage. And according to the Hindu tradition, that would be following the laws of nature. And you can determine that for yourself. We all have limits we come up against. If you decided to jump off a high building, you are not going to disprove the law of gravity. You're going to prove the law of gravity. We have to respect the law of nature. Now, another way to approach this, and we'll make this our closing thought here in the final few minutes, is the prayer of St. Francis. I've loved this over the years, and I've used this even in our Christmas letter, as we sent out a Christmas letter every year following the tradition of my mother. And I've tried to frame each of our letters with a scripture, a poem, or a thought broader, bigger than our own family, but then to write around what that thought is and how that applied to our family during this past year. So one year we used the prayer of St. Francis. Let me just recall some of this to you. There are different versions of this. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Certainly we can be instruments. We can allow ourselves to be used for healing and for the betterment of our society and for peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. So again, if using the farming analogy of Fred Chope and his father up in Straight Fork, southern West Virginia, when you put out your corn, if you're going to plant the corn, then you're going to get corn, right? So you're going to reap what you sow. So let us sow love instead of hate. Let us, where there's injury, let's have pardon. Forgiveness is a gift, not only to the other person, but it's a gift to yourself, because if you carry too much revenge and anger too long, you'll get sick. It won't help you. Where there's doubt, faith. Again, we call Fred and Nancy, they have a grandson named Caleb. Caleb was one of those with Joshua who went into the promised land and said that there are giants, there are people there, but we can overcome those. We can fight against them. We can win. And this was a message that people needed to hear, rather than those doubt messages that the giants are too big and we can't fight them. We can, where there is despair, let us have hope. Where there's doubt, let us have faith. And where there's darkness, light. Again, we have on Facebook in the past week or so, people began to comment that it's getting lighter. We had our darkest day in December 21st, and now every day is a few seconds lighter. And soon we'll be having light until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and it'll be wonderful. But where there is darkness, let us have light. And then where there's sadness, joy. And we don't control all of this, but what we can control, we can spread the joy. And grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand. One of the high privileges of being in the healing profession, and I would advocate that each of us are healers to others within our family, to those that we love the most. You don't have to be a doctor or a nurse or in the healthcare profession to be a healer, but we do have to have a certain attitude, and that is to try to understand someone else rather than try to just force our own effort each time. To be understood, rather to be understood as to understand. That understanding is more important. To love, to be loved as to love. Of course, being giving. To give as to is more important than receiving. Pardoning is more important than being pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. And so that's one of the versions of St. Francis' prayer, but it certainly gets at the thought that we have a destiny. This is a brand new year. We cannot change everything, but just for today, we can begin to make some small changes. And I hope this has spoken to your heart, and that you will take the opportunity that is yours today to begin to do some improvement for your health, and of course for your happiness, and then for the sake of those that you love and care for. And until the next time, this is Dr. Greenbrier Allman thanking you for joining us on our program, Tender Loving Care. Special thanks to Channel 3 for this opportunity to come your way each week. We'll see you next week.
Stories of a West Virginia Doctor, written by Dr. Harold D. Allman. A collection of 55 short stories about his experience as a small-town doctor in central West Virginia. And Tender Loving Care. Stories from a West Virginia Doctor, Volume 2, written by Dr. Greenbrier Allman, using videotapes to write 70 additional stories of his father's very colorful life as a small-town doctor. They can be found for purchase at Amazon.com and most local bookstores. Tune into Channel 3 Buckhannon for Tender Loving Care with Dr. Greenbrier Allman, where he talks about the connection between Christianity and medicine.